Hey, one thing that a lot of people have been asking me, and I kind of hope to cover and answer some of that in this. I don't think I'm probably going to cover everything that people want to know, so hit me up in the comments if there's anything that you're interested in or want me to talk about, because that's kind of how this works. So the question was kind of, I guess, like the work-life balance of off-grid living. How do people manage to live off-grid and survive off grid, and I guess kind of participate in civilization and have a life still? And how do people get off the grid? How do people do it financially? Because that is a big consideration. So from my own personal experience, it was a total on a shoestring. I was running a candle making company, and most of you guys know I've got MS, and it wasn't doing my health any good. So I kind of thought, you know what, I'm at a point in my life where just stop the ride. I want to get off, and so closed my company down, got a caravan, and I joined up with Woof UK, which was absolutely brilliant. I would definitely recommend looking into volunteer placements if you've got a bit of experience and you're wanting to get more, or if you're starting off with nothing, then I would definitely recommend it. And if you've got a lot of experience, then people will be very grateful. So yeah, I'll put a link to that in the description. But Woof UK was kind of my entry into the off-grid world. So I spent a little while traveling around, in my caravan with my pup, and me and Alfie went to a few different places and eventually arrived at a community that really liked, fit in really well. So just kind of ended up moving there and staying there for like 4 or 5 years in the end. So that was kind of my entry, and then when I left there, it was just kind of through people and places that I'd got to know through that off-grid scene, and kind of the friends and kind of community that I'd kind of discovered through doing the off-grid living up to that point. So I mean, once you've kind of into the off-grid scene, it's a bit easier to kind of make roots in. So yeah, check out Woof UK. It stands for Willing Workers on Organic Farms. And also check out Diggers and Dreamers, because the place that I ended up living at was a housing cooperative, and housing cooperatives are fantastic. They're basically there to abolish the relationship between landlord and tenant. So you're in effect a landlord and tenant. Most of them are kind of like very eco-conscious communities. Always check, before you move into places, because some places will market themselves as off-grid when maybe they aren't as off-grid as they first appear. So if that's something that's important to you, and check animal policies and stuff before you move in. But I mean, co-ops is definitely a good way forward. Diggers and Dreamers is a great online resource, for the UK, for like by county where places are, and off-grid communities, and alternative housing situations. So if you're wanting to get into off-grid living and you don't have a budget to buy your own land, then that is how I did it. And yeah, so links in the description for that. If you do have the money to buy your own land, I mean, how do people do it? I mean, how do you think? It's kind of like pretty much the same way as if you're going to go and buy a house. People save up. A lot of people I know that own land have done it because they've kind of got redundancy payouts, or they've retired, or they've just, like, some people, I think I've had one friend who inherited a bit of money and bought some land with it, which I thought was a really beautiful use. So I mean, that's kind of like pretty much exactly the same for changing your living situation if you're in civilization or off grid. I mean, if you're wanting to buy land and live off grid, most people will go and use that for some sort of business, so that they'll be making money off the land, and that'll be supporting them financially, which is something that the Welsh government has got really good with the One Planet Development Scheme. I have been a bit skeptical about that in the past, but that is mainly because, in my experience, people mistake it as some alternative, like, planning permission for off-grid settlements, which it really isn't. The OPD is there to create rural businesses and rural infrastructure, that are eco-friendly and eco-conscious. and getting your carbon footprint down to 2.4 hectares. I mean, I think on the quiz thing I took, it was I was like 3.4 or something. So it's a very, very difficult, very stringent way of living, but an absolutely amazing one. And I think that the OPD building standards for communities, using things from the land that you've got there rather than getting materials in, is definitely a good standard to have if you're looking at building a community. But I mean, if people are kind of wanting to do the off grid thing, I think, another thing is important to say is that I think that there's a lot of stuff online that gives a bit of an illusion that everybody that is off grid is totally, totally off grid. And they really aren't, because I mean, everyone's on Facebook, I'm on YouTube. Again, there's the difference between the kind of supply grid and the information grid. But I mean, it depends how far off the grid that you want to go. So that's another thing to think about. And when you're looking at all these kind of social media accounts of people living off grid, you've got to realize that most people will be kind of, have jobs or be earning money from, from their land, or will, I know a lot of people that work in a full-time existence and then go to their woodland at the weekend, and I'm like, oh my good God, how are you not knackered to death right now? But they manage it and they pull it off because it's that determination. And especially if you're a prepper, then your bug out location is something that you're probably going to want to put some energy into. So I think that's a lot of it. But again, a lot of people retire and go off grid when they retire, which I think is a really, really, really good life choice, to be fair. I mean, generally, but if you're kind of getting to an age where you're finishing a job, then yeah, go for it. I say for me, it was purely a health decision, and I've not looked back. So off grid living has definitely got a lot of different balances to it, and so a lot of people, making things at Christmas, kind of like making wreaths and beautiful, beautiful things from a land to sell. People earn money by that. So once you've got your land, but again, the question of how people get land, it's pretty much, yeah, exactly like buying a house. I don't see many videos on YouTube that impress me enough to share, but I'll put a link in the description to this one, because the awesome Van Dabidozi, if you guys aren't following him, then you definitely should be. And it's done an amazing, amazing off-grid setup video that is absolutely fantastic and full of wonderful information, especially if anyone is looking at potentially setting up anywhere in Scotland. So I'll put a link to that in the description, because there's a lot of good stuff in that. But yeah, I hope that's kind of answered the questions, really. And I mean, again, it depends what sort of standing you want to be on if you're wanting to go off grid permanently and live off grid. If you're wanting to have the permanence, then buying land might be a lot better than kind of renting a housing cooperative or being a permitted squatter on a piece of land. But then again, you're going to have the whole stress of being a landowner and all the responsibilities that come with that. So there's lots of different things. And again, if you're kind of like not having the responsibilities of owning land, which is what I like, because I think anything official is just a whole pile of stress, to be fair. So you've got the plus side for that, but then also you've maybe not got the permanence, and you don't know what's going to be going on with your living situation as much as if you owned the piece of land and you were in direct correspondence with people regarding it. So yeah, there's a lot of things to think about if people are wanting to get off grid. But yeah, hope that's helped. Peace and love.